Salam, Namaste, Adab, and welcome for today's event. Today we are going to hear Professor Nishat Zaidi on Karbala. You know, when Karbala comes in the imagination, it is a story of sacrifice, tragedy, and extreme, horrible story of that time. And it brings a lot of inspiration and many other things. So how Premchand has written and how Professor Nishat Zaidi has expressed it, let's hear her today. And the introductory remarks will be given by Professor Syed Ali Nadeem Rizavi Saab from AMU, who is a professor of history, Center of Advanced Studies, and he is a scholar of medieval Indian history. Concluding remarks will be given by Dr. Ipsita Haldar, who is an associate professor of comparative literature, Jadavpur University, West Bengal. She has written a monograph, Reclaiming Karbala, the Nation of Islam. And so welcome you all. And now I invite Professor Nadeem Rizavi Saab for the formal introductory remark. Nadeem Saab.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you are listening. I think given the months when this program is being held, it is quite appropriate that there is a discussion to be held on the theme of Karbala. Perhaps all those in the subcontinent, at least, are aware that Karbala is not only a particular town in Iraq, but Karbala is also a place in each and every village, town, and city of the subcontinent. Whether it is the Islamic Pakistan, or our secular India, or Bangladesh. In fact, even apart from these three places, the concept of a piece of land being designated as Karbala is something which now is extending also outside the subcontinent. That means that Karbala, as a metaphor, as an event, is something which is important not only to a particular section of the society, but it is something which has influenced a large number of people throughout the world. It goes without saying that at least as far as our subcontinent is concerned, there is hardly any language or region which has not been influenced by the story which is represented by Karbala. I am happy to note that in this particular program, there is a person who has worked on one region of India and tried to see how Karbala has influenced the Bengal society as such. Let me say that it is a concept which is beyond religion itself. We just cannot say that Karbala is a religious event. It's an event which talks about emancipation of humanity, which talks about freedom. And perhaps that is why we have people like Premchand, who, when they thought of writing a drama, they chose the theme of Karbala. If you read the introduction which has been given by Premchand in his book, in his drama. Now, fortunately available to all the readers who are not knowing Hindi or Urdu through the translation which has been done by Professor Nishat Zaidi. We come to know that Premchand thought that the story of Karbala for the Indian people is as important as the story of Ramayana and Mahabharata. All these three mythologies, incidentally, I mean, the way the story of Karbala has been presented to us is also a mythology in a way. Some historical facts, but then later on, things added to it through imagination. That story which developed over a period of time becomes the story of the liberation of man. It also becomes the story of the emancipation of women. Let me remind that the type of character of Zainab, which is presented in the story of Karbala, is something which is spectacular. Here is a woman who, in the very modern sense of the term, is aware of her rights, fighting for her rights. She's not crying, but she's there as the support of the entire family. She is the one who leads the show after the Battle of Karbala. We are fortunate enough that there are at least three very important works which have been done. One, which we are going to discuss today, the book of Nishat Zaidi, how she has translated this drama into English. And I must congratulate her that the introduction which she has written is remarkable. I don't think that even a historian could have done justice in the way as she has done justice for us to understand who Munshi Premchand was and what his approach was, why he wrote in the two languages, and why ultimately he came to prefer to write only in Hindi. I urge everyone that if you have to understand even Premchand and not only Karbala, please go through the introduction which Nishat Zaidi has given in this work of hers. Very recently, I don't know how far you people are aware, but there is another translation of the same drama of Karbala which has been done. And this has been printed by Sahitya Academy, published by Sahitya Academy. And the translators are Haris Qadir and Sami Rafiq. Sami Rafiq is also a professor of English, but unlike Nishat, she serves at Aligarh Muslim University. It has recently come out, and perhaps not many people who have, I mean, the way Nishat's work has been, been received by the public, perhaps the same reception so far has been missing for this work. But I urge all of you that there, in the introduction given by Sami Rafiq and Haris Qadir, there are certain gems which are embedded within them. So I think it would be very good if, along with Nishat Zaidi's translation, you also go through the translation of the same drama, once again in English, given by Haris Qadir and Sami Rafiq. Along with that, I would like to draw the attention of people towards another book. This time, which is earlier to what Nishat Zaidi and the others have done. This is Ismat Chughtai one drop of blood, a qatra khoon, which has also been recently translated into English. So these three books, I think, complement each other, and I think that in order to understand the import of what Premchand was trying to tell us, one has to read all these three books. There is one aspect which I would like to discuss with you, and that is something which has been given into the introduction of Nishat Zaidi, and something which has been also given by my friend Sami Rafiq also, and also discussed in the work A Qatra, One Drop of Blood by Ismat Chughtai, in the at least in the foreword of the English translation. And that is that in all three, one impression is given, and that is that perhaps the rendering of the story as a drama was something which was being done for the first time by Munshi Premchand. I mean, you will find, a story which is repeated again and again, that the Muslims of that period did not like the fact that something so sacred to them as the story of Karbala is now going to be presented as a drama. And as Nishat points out, that there were many agitations and there were many letters which were written to Munshi Premchand. What exactly are you doing? And Munshi Premchand then had to write letters explaining his position. In fact, he also got angry. Why he should not be allowed to do such a thing. But I would like to remind that if you go a little outside the subcontinent, say for example, Iraq, Iran, Syria, or any of these places in Central Asia, the story of Karbala was something which was presented to the people, the audience, not via any type of recitation of prose or verse, but initially as a play. In fact, it is said that Persian and Arabic drama started with the drama or presentations of the Karbala story. This was something which perhaps was not so well known among the Indian Muslims, and that is why their reaction against Munshi Premchand. Now we are living in the age of internet. We are living in the age when everything is now present before us on our television screens. Till date, the story of Karbala is still being played as a drama. In fact, I would also like to remind all of you that the very concept of Ashur Khana, the place where this story of Karbala was narrated as a drama, meant a theater. Ashur Khana was a theater, a place of performance. But then, when the concept of Ashur Khana was brought to India, from being a place of performance as a drama, then it turned into a place where mourning assemblies would be held. With these short words, I mean, one can go on and on and on to speak on these topics. I'm aware that Razi Saab has given me 4 to 5 minutes and I have already crossed them. But let me say that this, very story of Karbala, irrespective of Premchand, can be talked about without bringing in religion as an independent topic for hours. But I'll stop here, and I would wish Nishat Zaidi to continue and take up and explain to us what she has done in this translation of hers. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadeem Saab. Extremely well done. And Shah Saba?
Thanks, Razi bhai. Thanks, Nadeem bhai. Am I audible?
Ji, Ji, sure.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Good morning, perhaps, for you. I'm very grateful to Razi Sahab for offering me this platform to discuss my book. I also thank Professor Rizavi and Dr. Ipsita Halda, my very dear friend, both with deep insight into the Karbala paradigm and its impact on Indian consciousness in their own ways. So I thank them for joining this session. Um, I began to translate the play around 2008, and I'm very grateful to my department where Premchand studies were sincerely pursued and promoted at that time. I must also mention my Vice Chancellor, Professor Mushirul Hassan, who took a keen interest in promoting Premchand studies at Jamia. Um, I must also mention a great book on Karbala written by Syed Akbar Aidar. It's a majestic book which sort of opened the possibility of bringing Karbala to the academic discourse. And I think everyone must read Syed Akbar Haidar's book on Karbala. So, Karbala, as far as Premchand's play is concerned, it is not the best known of Premchand's writings. So, the question is, why did I then choose to translate something that was lesser known, not his best known writing? Um, and following Aga Shahid Ali's example, I would say for a hell of reasons, each more compelling than the other. Apart from personal reasons, to me, the most interesting aspect that attracted me to the text was that it singularly embodied the epistemological and ethical views of Premchand in all their ambivalences and complexities. To me, this play unfolds the making of the modern intellectual involved in the profound task of imagining the nation, not by mimicking Western models, but on his own terms. A daring act of epistemic disobedience, if we can call it. Any reader of Premchand would find it intriguing why Premchand, the Upanyas Samrat, he was already established as Upanyas Samrat, the king of fiction in Hindi and Urdu. Why did he choose to write a play, which is a performance genre, on Karbala, on the theme of Karbala, knowing fully well that it would not go down well with his Muslim audience, and that too at the prime of his literary career, also knowing fully well that drama is a genre in which he had not succeeded much. So I think the answer lies in Premchand's stern refusal to treat language, identity, or religion as a matter of ownership. Karbala display is a cross-cultural and cross-linguistic text. At the height of communal tensions in colonial India, Premchand had the temerity to take up a significant event in Islamic history and transform it into a nationalist narrative. We are all familiar with Benedict Anderson's position that nations are imagined communities. If nations are imagined communities, then what are the modalities through which India and its vast and diverse population was imagined into existence? A look at the broad spectrum of discursive constellations in colonial India at the turn of the 20th century reveals that at one pole were the communitarian nationalists who envisioned a nation as a political codification of a single cultural community. On the other hand, was the Congress and Gandhian syncretic populism that pitched for India as a series of discrete communities united under a larger spiritual idea of nation as harmony. Mahatma Gandhi's civilizational frame for imagining the nation was firmly hinged on his ethico moral universe, where the other was to be treated with respect. It is in this context that I take a closer look at Premchand's play Karbala as an expression of his unique way of imagining the nation that was in tandem with his Gandhian ideal. It neither mimicked the Western model that privileged territorial materiality, nor disavowed the transoceanic civilizational interactions and synergies that had come to constitute the syncretic culture of India, its Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, in favor of any exclusionary imagining. In fact, if we look at the print journey of the play, Premchand began to write Karbala in July 1923 and he finished writing it in January 1924. The play was first published in Hindi by Ganga Pustak Mala in November 1924. However, it was only 2 years later that the play was serialized in Zamana from July 1926 to April 1928 in Urdu, but with some alterations. The play was rendered into Urdu partly by Premchand himself and partly, as he has mentioned in a letter, by his associate Munir Haider Qureshi. In the book form, it appeared much later, in fact, 6 years after Premchand's death, by Lala Lajpat Rai and Sons Lahore Publishing House. So, when Karbala was published in Hindi in 1924, Hindi magazines welcomed the play. But Premchand did not have an easy, path as far as publication in Urdu is concerned. The editor of Zamana, Dayanarayan Nigan, who was also a close friend of Premchand, he consulted assistant editor Sayyid Ahsan Sambuli, and Sambuli consulted his other Muslim friends, and they all advised him against publishing it in its current form due to inconsistencies in the dominant history. There were several points of objection. One was that the play departs from the dominant, telling of the tale, dominant narrative, and this might incense the Shia community. Secondly, that the profane genre of drama was used for the sacred history of Karbala. This might also not go down well with the Shia community. And another point of objection, strangely, was that Yazid, after all, was a Muslim, and he is portrayed in such negative light in the play. Now, Premchand was extremely unhappy with these objections. Strangely, neither Premchand nor Sambali nor anyone else seemed to have been aware of the fact that in Iran the practice of tazia, is an old practice, as Nadim Bhai also mentioned in his opening remarks, which is actually a performance of mourning, as its name clearly indicates, and so it's a kind of dramatic and ritual performance of Karbala event which has been practiced in Iran for a long time. Premchand rejected all allegations, and in fact he was so angry that he said that if you do not want to publish, please don't publish it. I will not change it. I have not written the play, but he did modify his position. In the Hindi play, he had written that the play is not written for performance, but if someone wants to perform it, then he can perform it with some modifications. But in the Urdu play, Premchand clearly wrote in the foreword that the play is not written for performance. But he also asserted, in his letter to Dayanarayan Nigam, that history and drama are two different things. Drama is not history, so I can take liberties with minor incidents. After all, it is drama. So thus, he did stick to his position, and he also was upset that when Khwaja Nisami writes about Krishna, it is so welcomed by Hindu community, and when a Hindu like Premchand writes about Karbala, Muslims cannot really embrace it with open arms. So that really irritated and upset him. So why then did he write about Karbala? What is Karbala? And again, Nadim Bhai in his opening remarks has very rightly introduced the fact that Karbala is not just a name of place in Iraq. It is a place which is there in in every part of the subcontinent, in every village, every town of the subcontinent. Karbala, actually, when we use the term Karbala, we do not refer to the place. We are actually talking about an event that unfolded in 7th century, where Prophet's grandson was martyred along with his close friend and family members in the desert of Karbala in Iraq by the forces of tyrant and sinful Yazid bin Muawiyah, who wanted Hussein to pledge allegiance to him. The Imam's sacrifice and his defiant refusal to compromise truth and submit to the forces of tyranny makes him an archetypal figure representing the pole of truth and justice in an eternal battle between right and wrong, or fair and foul, waged in every age, every period of history. And that is why perhaps it inspired Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti to say, Shah Ast Hussain, Badshah Ast Hussain, Deen Ast Hussain, Di Pana Ast Hussain, Sardad Nadad Dast Dar Dast Yazid, Haqqa ke bina la ilah Ast Hussain, which I can roughly translate as Hussein is justice, Hussein is the refuge for justice. He gave his head but not his hands in the hands of Yazid. The truth is that Hussein laid the foundation of oneness of God. For Shia Muslims, the memorializing of the event through religious gatherings like Majlis has resistive resonances, legitimizing their claim that the succession of the Prophet should have remained within the family of the Prophet. It is also the medium through which they reconcile with their personal grief or sober down their joyous celebrations. But beyond this sectarian connotation, Karbala has appealed to the wider world outside Shia Islam for representing a certain set of values. It has lived in popular memory through oral and written literature, whereby generations of interlocutors, such as reciters, poets, writers, have time and again renewed the story of Karbala by recasting it in various discursive forms rooted in their contemporary context. In fact, the symbolism of Karbala has lent itself to liberal, leftist, third world, anti-imperialist, feminist, all kinds of rhetorics. It has also integrated itself into the revolutionist dogma influenced by Western political philosophies. In Urdu Marsiya, for instance, poets have skillfully rendered the story of Karbala in all its lyrical poignancy. So while the linear framework of most of these renditions is the same, Marsiya poets have taken their own imaginative liberties in portraying finer details of Karbala, often lending local color to the story, from rites and rituals to flora and fauna. Everything in the Marsiya poetry by poets like Dilgir, Khalid, Sada, Dabir, Anis, it is completely native. For instance, Sauda's, a line from his Marsiya, Chhao bhai e banre Qasim, a banri teri yaad mein roe. It is evening, O groom Qasim, come back, your bride wails for your memory. Or even Mir Anis, when he says, Zahra tumhare baag ki kheti hari rahe, sandal se mang, bachon se godi bhari rahe. Zahra, may your garden remain green forever. May sandal paste adorn your forehead forever. May you be blessed with children. So these examples clearly relocate the characters of Karbala in Awadh culture. Not only this, poets like Allama Iqbal, Ali Sardar Jafri, Ahmad Faraz, Parveen Shakir, and many others have made non-sectarian use of the metaphor of Karbala to represent various semantic fields such as revolution, social justice, and so on. It is also interesting to note that most of the front runners of the progressive writers movement, they were Shia, like Sibte Hassan Saab or Sajjad Zahir, Kafi Azmi, Wamil Jaunpuri, and they all vociferously deployed the Karbala paradigm in promoting their progressive ideals. Leading nationalist leaders, both Sunnis like Maulana Muhammad Ali Jauhar, Abul Kalam Azad, and even Hindus like Mahatma Gandhi, who invoked Karbala at the time of Salt Satyagraha, invoked Karbala to rejuvenate their anti-colonial struggle. Towering Sunni nationalist leader like Maulana Muhammad Ali Jauhar went on to say, Qatle Hussain asl mein marge Yazid hai, Qatle Hussain asl mein marge Yazid hai, Islam zinda hota hai har Karbala ke baad. The killing of Hussain is in fact the death of Yazid. Every Karbala gives life to Islam. He even went to the extent of recasting the definition of Shia when he said, हक व बातिल की है पैकार हमेशा जारी, जो न बातिल से डरे है वही शियाने हुसैन. The battle between the good and the evil is eternal. Those who surrender to evil are those who do not surrender to evil are true Shias, are true Shias for Hussain. Another significant Sunni leader, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, wrote Shahadat-e-Hussain to pay tribute to the paradigm of truth and justice which Karbala represented. So, Nadeem Bhai mentioned Ek Qatra Khoon, this beautiful novel by Ismat Chughtai. In fact, before Ismat Chughtai, Mir Musharraf Hussain wrote another beautiful novel called Bishad Sandhu, which is based on Karbala. It's a Bangla novel which is based on Karbala. And interestingly, Ismat Chughtai's novel, which has been translated by Tahira Naqvi, which Nadeem Bhai just showed, it was written in the context of emergency, and the novel is a moral and political allegory. And in the preface to the novel, Chughtai says, "This is the story of those 72 men who took a stand against imperialism to defeat human rights. This is not a 1400-year-old story. It is the story of today. For even today, man's biggest enemy is man. Even today, the standard bearer of humanity is man. Whenever a Yazid raises his head in any part of the world, a Hussein steps forward and crushes him. Even today, light wins against darkness." And Agha Shahid Ali, if you're familiar with his poetry, he has written beautiful poems around the theme of Karbala. In fact, his prose poem about Karbala, which I'm very fond of, it is titled Karbala, A History of the House of Sorrow. It's a beautiful introduction to Karbala, and I would strongly recommend everyone to read this prose poem. I'll just quote a few lines from this poem. "And Jesus wept, and as if the news had just reached them, 1400 years after the Battle of Karbala, near ancient Babylon, not far from Euphrates, in the year AH 61, AD 680, mourners weep for the prince among martyrs, Hussein, grandson of the Prophet, son of Ali, father of clay, and Fatima, the Prophet's only surviving child. Memorializing Hussein on the 10th of Muharram is the rite of Shia Islam, so central that at funeral those events are woven into elegies, every death framed into by that Calvary, for just as Jesus went to Jerusalem to die on the cross, Hussein went to Karbala to accept the passion that had been meant for him from the beginning of time." And so the poem goes on. So what one is trying to say is that Premchand was neither the first Indian writer to undertake a literary rendering of the historical event of Karbala, nor was he the first to indigenize the characters of Karbala. He was also not the first Hindu writer to write about Karbala. Several Hindu Marsiya poets like Munshi Chunnulal Lucknowi, who wrote under the pseudonym of Dilgir, Lala Balwant Singh, Lala Ram Prasad, Roop Kumari, they have written devoutly about Imam Hussein's love for justice and truth. Some even like Nathan Lal Vaishi drew parallel between Insan-e-Kamil Imam Hussain and Maryada Purushottam Ram, the ideal hero and the ideal king. So the question is, what distinguishes Premchand's rendering of Karbala? The answer lies to me in his location and context, his unique positioning within the literary cultures of Hindi and Urdu, his choice of genre, and the language that he used for rendering the story of Karbala. Now, if we look at Premchand's rendering of Karbala, he rests the main plot of the play on the established, reliable scholarly authorities of Karbala. He had read these sources very closely. Amir Ali is one source that he mentions in his letter. So the opening scene of the play foregrounds the environment of revelry and licentiousness that permeates Yazid's court. Yazid is surrounded by a fleet of sycophants like Zohar, So when Yazid seeks advising regarding the possibility of allegiance by Hussein, Zohar immediately counsels, Ya Mawla, my submission is that even if Hussein agrees, sparing his life would be dangerous for the clan of Abu Sufyan, just like killing a snake but nurturing its offspring. When Yazid's pious wife Hinda comes and warns Yazid against his plans, he dismisses her and he says, Hinda, silence. All these ideas are apt for religion, not for the material world. My grandfather, that is Abu Sufyan, embraced Islam because it fetched wealth and esteem. So even though Muslims, they did not really abide by the ethical code of Islam that Prophet propagated. These discussions throw light on the root cause of the events that culminated in the martyrdom of Imam Hussein at the hands of the followers of Islam. Something that Premchand found quite intriguing as he writes in the Kathasar in the beginning of the play. He says, rarely has it happened in history that the grandson of any religious leader had to suffer such atrocities at the hands of the follower of their own grandfather. The debauchery of Yazid's court, coupled with his lust for power, misuse of wealth, and complete absence of principles, is juxtaposed with the representation of Hussein in the play. Right from the beginning, Hussein is seen, even by the followers of Yazid, as a man of honor who always keeps his words and never tolerates lies or injustice. Thus, the contrast between the widely used metaphors of Yazidiyat and Husainiyat, representing the poles of tyranny and righteousness, is established right in the beginning of the play. So the linear frame of the story in the play, for most part, follows the popular, versions represented in Marsiya traditions or orally transmitted in the majlis by zakirs. For example, Premchand's portrayal of Walid as good man trapped on the wrong side, which is contrary to popular oral tellings of the narrative of Karbala in Majalis that portray all commanders of Yazid as evil. They reaffirm Premchand's claim to have read extensively and very closely about the life of Hussein. As he wrote to Diana Ryan Nigam, I read about the life of Hussein. His willingness for sacrifice moved me. The result was this drama. There are minor departures. For example, Imam Hussein's son, Ali Asghar, who is said to have been 6 months old at the time of Battle of Karbala, in the play is represented as someone who participates in all family discussions. Likewise, Abbas, who was the brother of Hussein, is presented as cousin, and Imam's daughter Suhra is shown as being present in the desert of Karbala. So these are minor departures that happen in the play, but so these are minor digressions. The major ones come in the form of insertion of two subplots in the story. Neither is purely fictional, as there are extant historical sources or oral narratives or legends that support both these subplots. One subplot, the first subplot, is the story of Wahab, who because of his newly wedded wife Nasima, he's so much in love with her that he does not want to sacrifice for Hussein, even though his mother is extremely upset with his decision. So that his story is one subplot, and the second subplot is more interesting, where Premchand introduces Hindu characters in the play, Sahasrai and his brothers. And this is very significant. So while many oral narratives suggest the participation of a community of Brahmins, called Datt Brahmins or Mohiyals, and many people have written about them, even Intezar Hussain Saab has written about Datt Brahmins in his travelogue cum autobiography called Justaju Kya Hai. So Premchand uses these legends to insert this subplot. Now, interestingly, as soon as Sahasrai and his brother appear on the stage in the play, the entire setting changes. Premchand describes the scene in these words: a village in Arabia, a big temple, a pond with concrete ghats, a pleasant garden with birds and animals such as peacocks, deer, and cows strolling around. Sahasrai and his brother performing evening havan and prayer near the pond. This scene appears hardly any different from that of any village in the Gangetic plain. So the scene is sort of transported to the location of Karbala, and the scene opens with brothers singing patriotic song written in chaste Sanskritized Hindi called Bharat Tanmandhan Sara Ho, Uski Seva Sab Dwara Ho. May Bharat be our body, our soul, and wealth. May it be served by all. Sahasrai's prayers, reflecting his desire to sacrifice everything in defense of truth and justice, directly align these brothers with the camp of Imam Hussain. The moment Sahasrai learns about Yazid's accession to caliphate, he readies himself to join Hussain. The two subplots intersect when, while going to Karbala, these brothers get to meet Nasima and her husband Wahab, who, for the fear of death, are trying to flee, the scene of battle to some distant land. But when Nasima, who has been, asking her husband, inspiring her husband to run away, when she gets to know that these non-Muslims are here to sacrifice their lives for Hussein, she feels disgusted, and husband and wife change their plans and they decide to join, forces with Imam Hussein. So later, when Wahab is killed, Imam Hussain, not Imam Hussain, sorry. When Wahab is killed, Sahasrai addresses Nasima as Sati and Devi. He calls her Sati, he calls her Devi. These are cross-cultural sort of insertions that Premchand introduces in the play, and when the brothers, reach Karbala, they shield Imam Hussain from the arrows of enemy. The Imam wants to perform namaz, and with his friends, and the enemy arrows are constantly coming in. So these brothers, stand. They make a wall and they protect Imam from the arrows of the enemy army. And after performing the namaz, the Imam tells Sahasrai, O followers of truth, we salute you, even though you are not the believer, but the religion which has worshippers of truth who are willing to die for justice, who consider life so insignificant that they are ready to sacrifice their lives for the support of the oppressed, is really a true religion in the eyes of God. May this religion always flourish. Along with the light of Islam, may its light also spread in all directions. So, and again, when these brothers march to the battlefield, they sing in chorus a patriotic song with the refrain of Jai Bharat, written by one of the leading figures of the Hindi movement, Sridhar Pathak. And it's a highly chaste Sanskritized Hindi in which this song is written, Jai Bharat Mam Pranapate, and so on and so forth. And when these brothers march, the Imam's brother Abbas is so impressed that he calls them true Muslims. Imam Hussain, after they die in the battle, Imam Hussain makes sure that the rites of his Hindu supporters are performed in accordance with their religious practices. And at the funeral pyre, again he lauds these warriors and their religion and nation. And he says, may our valiant ones always shed their blood for this community. The entire speech of Imam is that these men are from the holy land that first resounded with the sound of Tawheed. May God grant them the highest status among the martyrs. There the flame rises from their pyre. O God, may the memory of this love never be wiped from the heart of Islam. May our brave men always shed their light for this, their blood for this nation. May the seed of friendship sown in the flames rising from these funeral pyres flourish till the day of judgment. Then there is a third interpolation, a brief one, which is introduced in the play. It inserts a yogi. The character of yogi is inserted in the play. When the yogi appears on the scene, the sound of Om precede his physical appearance, and the sound of Om is so overwhelming that Imam's supporters immediately point out that this is such a poignant, overwhelming sound. And then the yogi appears. He introduces himself as Sadhu, and he says Maharshi Muhammad made the whole, he says, I come from the country where the sound of Tawheed, unity of God, was first heard. Maharshi Muhammad made the whole universe reverberate with that same sound. His concept of unity of God awakened even the rishis from their meditation. I have come from Bharat to pay my respect to that great soul. So these are a few interpolations introduced by the Imam. And when the yogi wants to touch the feet of Imam, the Imam stops him from doing that. One human being should not bow down before another human being. Yogi does not feel offended. In fact, he praises the Imam. So Karbala attains the quintessence of a morally charged universe, resonating the highest ideals upheld in Vedantic philosophy and becoming an inspiration for a people oppressed by colonial rule to rise and stand for truth and justice. All these insertions and these interpolations, they reaffirm what Premchand had written to Dayanarayan Nigam in a letter. He had written that the aim of the drama and of principal characters' portrayal is to make Hindus pay tribute to Hazrat Imam Hussain. That is why I have written the play. Apart from being religious also, apart from being political also. So his objective was not only this but political, and the play is a political play. As you can see, he's using the play to promote certain ideals. Premchand unsettled the dominant normative discourses by translocating the story of Karbala in a deterritorialized, territorialized ideal space where mutual understanding and respect dictate intercommunitarian interactions between the men of faith of both these communities. Such an approach gains meaning if you look at the context in which Premchand was writing the play. 1920s was rife with protests against repressive colonial regime. Rowlatt Act Satyagraha of 1919, Jallianwala Bagh, 1919, Khilafat movement, civil disobedience movement, Chauri Chaura violence, and the suspension of non-cooperation movement, which really incited people, sort of enraged people's sentiments. All these had a deep impact on Premchand's mind. And after listening to Gandhiji's speech on 8th February 1921, when Gandhiji had visited Gorakhpur and addressed a rally in the famous Ghazi Mian Ka Maidan, where Premchand had gone to listen to him, Premchand came back and resigned from his government job. So obviously that was the moment of sort of conversion to Gandhism for Premchand. And after that, when the communal tensions began to rise, Premchand, this is not the only effort by Premchand to awaken, his community about Islam, or to inform them, to familiarize them with the great men of Islam. In July 1923, he had published a short article on Hazrat Ali in a magazine called Prabha, and in that essay he had, he sort of introduced Hazrat Ali. The essay opens by the statement, the brightness of Hazrat Ali's fame and the flawlessness of his character has no match. He was not a mendicant or a saint. He also cannot be called a politician or a conqueror, but the reverence he commands, both from Shias and Sunnis, is unparalleled. In 1924, again he wrote another essay called Nabi Ka Niti Nirvah, which was published in Saraswati. In 1925, in Madhuri, he wrote a short story, Mandir and Masjid. And by the time Karbala was published in Urdu, Premchand had already published his very famous novel Rangabhumi and Kayakalp, both of which took a sharp dig at the conservative pundits and Maulvis. Uh, likewise, his short story that I just mentioned, Mandir or Masjid, also sort of castigates these orthodox people. So it is against our orthodoxy. Premchand's play Karbala offers a trenchant critique of these very same orthodoxies that Premchand had been sort of attacking in his other writings. If Premchand's fiction embodies his empirical concerns and his reform agenda, what we notice in Karbala is that he allegorizes those same concerns by using the multivocality of Karbala symbol, such as the antagonist Yazid's identification with oppressive colonial regimes, secularization of religion, and redefining of the Hindu-Muslim identities by their participation in the conception of just self, what we can call just self. We also, cannot really ignore the irony that Premchand, who was who was a hardcore Gandhian, the titles of his, works, Sangram, Rangbhumi, Khalam Talwar or Tyag, they all invoke martial metaphors. So this irony, if it appears like irony, if it appears anomaly for a Gandhian like Premchand to choose such titles, one has to come to the leitmotif of Karbala. It is the story of a battle between truth and justice pitted against the terrible injustice and brutal corruption. Karbala thus becomes the touchstone by which all other values are to be tested, actions to be judged, and the new nation to be imagined. In other words, what Premchand does is that he transforms a 7th century event of Islamic history into a national allegory. And interestingly, there are sections in the play which really take you in this direction, in thinking in this direction. For example, the Qazi, when he's attacked by people, when they discover that he has been lying all through, when he's attacked by people, he starts telling them, look, I'm a Muslim, and it is unlawful for a Muslim to kill another Muslim. At that, all these people, the masses, they tell him very clearly that you are not a Muslim because you do not have the character of a Muslim. So it is the character which makes a Muslim, not the rituals. Similarly, when these brothers go to sacrifice, in the battlefield, Abbas tells Imam Hussein, today I discovered that Islam exists outside the boundaries of Islam. Thus, the battle of Karbala is the battle of ideas, wherein a politically conscious writer like Premchand, he must take sides to produce liberating knowledge for his people caught in the clutches of tyrannical rule. Should I stop, or do I have another, 3-4 minutes? Razi Saab, you can stop me if you want.
No, quite mesmerizing. Keep on going. Good. Yeah, you can go for another 10 minutes.
Okay, not 10 minutes, I'll take less.
Okay, you have the liberty.
Thank you. So, what we notice, in the play is Premchand's assertion of his political position also, through the story, the metaphor of Karbala. When he was asked about his political affiliation, Premchand said that I belong to that future party which is driven by the purpose of political edification of the underdogs, right? So all these ideas, they immediately align him with the ideals represented by Karbala. Compelled by the lived experience of his people undergoing, a radical shift, Premchand privileged political views over religious sentiments, and the play Karbala is no exception. He says that the aim of the drama and of the principal character's portrayal is to make Hindus pay tribute to Imam Hussain, as I mentioned earlier. So the dramatic register of Karbala frames Gandhian nationalism and resolves its central paradoxes: non-violence in the face of violence, passivity that entails active agency, in the face of brute force of the colonial regime, penance and satyagraha as instrument of morality that underpin the political through the charismatic figure of Imam. So Karbala invites active emulation in the form of rebellion against corrupt rulers, of answering to the call of the oppressed, of promoting good and rejecting evil, of propagating the ideal of true religion and identity. Besides, in opting to publish first in Hindi, a play about a significant event of Islamic history that unfolded in 7th century Arabia, and in recasting that story to convey the ideals of his nation and national pride, Premchand transfers the imagined community of nation into a transnational zone where neither language nor religious rituals act as guiding principles of unity. Rather, unity here is achieved by shared ethical code. In fact, the textual space within which chaste Sanskritized Hindi verses find space alongside the Marsiya of Miranis and ghazals by lesser known ghazal poets also serves as a model for this imagined community of the nation. In fact, this play epitomizes serious political concerns of a sensitive writer in colonial times. Sahas Rai and Imam Hussain, they both are bound together by the power of truth and virtue in a relationship of mutual admiration and cooperation. Premchand does not attempt to erase or undermine differences between religious practices of two communities, thereby suggesting that unity does not mean homogeneity. He is not suggesting homogeneity, he is not suggesting monological discourse, he is promoting pluriversality, if we can use this term. So, the geographical expansiveness which is evident in the idioscape explored in Karbala is aimed at expanding the mental map of his readers, turning them away from the claustrophobic idea of nation that mimics the Western emphasis on territoriality and homogeneity. Uh, you know, uh, the why of translation manifests effective history, wherein Benjamin's words, past comes in constellation with the present. In translating an event of Islamic history into a nationalist narrative, 7th century Islamic history event into a 20th century nationalist narrative, and today, as we discuss, exactly a century later, the English translation of the play. The play was published in 1924, and now we are in 2024, so almost a century later. So, in discussing this in English translation of the play exactly a century after its publication, I presume this will open doors for revisiting these constellations and view history not in terms of dominance but in terms of entanglement and coevalence. In fact, the play Karbala encapsulates Premchand's dream of a decolonial future of repair and coexistence, where the Fanonian dream of decoloniality, in the sense of, and I'm quoting Achille Mbembe, repairing and making the world whole again, would be meaningfully attained. Thank you.
Wonderful. What a narration. Really. So let's see how Dr. Ikshita Haldar concludes this talk. Dr. Haldar, please.
Yes. So, let me first express my extreme delight to be here today to present concluding remarks for Professor Nishat Zaidi's talk on her translation of Premchand's Karbala. And I thank the organizers of the Indian diaspora, Washington, D.C. Metro, and Professor Raziuddin as the nodal person, of course. And let me first congratulate Professor Zaidi for accomplishing this task of translating Premchand's Karbala to English with a critical introduction. As Professor Rizavi has already mentioned, this is a very important contribution, not only to the field of Premchand studies, but also to the field of, I would say, Hindi and Urdu literary spheres in North India. So anytime, this critical introduction should be referred to the students of literature. So in the introduction to the Karbala, a historical play, she has praised Premchand's contribution in the vibrant years of the subcontinent's literary modernity of the 1920s and 1930s, when the Hindi and Urdu public spheres were getting consolidated by new definitions of linguistic and religious boundaries. I'm also privileged to share today's platform with Professor Nadim Rezavi, sir, whose scholarly and organizational endeavors I deeply admire. And most importantly, as we talk about Premchand's Karbala, a gathering such as this is important to feel and realize once again the emotive power of Karbala across any boundaries. But without further ado, I would like to reiterate some critical issues that Professor Zaidi has raised in her fantastic talk. She has dealt with the Battle of Karbala as a literary trope, and it's a complex literary history centered on the reception of Karbala as an emotionally charged up site that she charted out here. And she placed Premchand's exploration of Karbala there to respond to Premchand's imagination of the nation in the first decades of 20th century in the context of literary modernity and nationalism in the emerging public sphere of North India. So every labor of love, as Professor Zaidi has mentioned her task of translation like this, it is her labor of love. So I would say that every labor of love has a personal reason. And that labor is most fulfilling, which engages the self in newer quest across several newer horizons. And Premchand's rendition of the Battle of Karbala as a universal saga of humanist ethics and values to offer sort of antidotes to the rising communal disharmony between the Hindus and the Muslims in the 1920s required, I would say, poetic liberty to turn history into literary truth. In Professor Zaidi's journey in the making of Karbala, a historical play from Premchand's Karbala, there is an academic suspension of her personal memory of Karbala that she mentions in her introduction as well, resulting in her engagement with broader literary issues, where she maps Premchand's Karbala in the Hindi and Urdu literary circulations in a multilingual context. And let me summarize her concerns. Karbala, as a universal and flexible trope to interpret immediate experiences, has already been a part of Professor Zaidi's discussion on Aga Shahid Ali's poetry. Here she looks into how Premchand, in his Karbala, responded to the growing communal antagonism once the marriage of convenience between the Hindus and the Hindu and Muslim political activists ended after the Khilafat movement in 1922. Though the Khilafat movement actually offered them a chance to revise the ideas of nation and nationalism in a transnational framework of anti-imperialist struggle by connecting with the cause of the caliphate, the Hindu political ideologues of the Indian National Congress, in reality, failed to follow up on Muslim transnationalism as a marker of Indian nationalism. And the geopolitically static notion of a Hindu nation was continuously reinforced by the emerging Hindu traditionalist endeavors inside and outside the Indian National Congress in the 1920s. Premchand's Karbala, in a literary effort to place transnational affect as the ethical value for the Indian nation, it actually acted as a sort of antidote, as a sort of corrective at the time of the 1920s. He would go on to reiterate these values throughout the 1920s as the Hindu nationalism, and as Hindu nationalism got consolidated and Muslim political separatism developed. Another version of Hindi Karbala was republished. The Urdu Karbala, we must note here, was not a literal translation of the already existing Hindi version. Premchand kept on refining his articulations of human values of resilience, compassion, and forgiveness as embodied in the character of Imam Hussain. Premchand is one of the few authors whose literary contributions went beyond the linguistic cultural dichotomism that formed North India, that actually torn North India by communally and linguistically dividing the Hindu and Urdu public spheres. Premchand, who was writing both in Hindi and Urdu, acts as a conduit, I would say, and can be taken as a wonderful example of what Sachin Ketkar marks as additive bilingualism, a potential marker of the bilingual local that Professor Zaidi so brilliantly exposes in her introduction. The Battle of Karbala was the most precarious episode of history for the Sunni Muslims, for exposing the inherent contradictions in the Sunni Caliphate when it turned dynastic, resulting in the murder of the grandsons of the Prophet Muhammad by the Umayyad Caliph Yazid. Sunni Islamic reform since the early 19th century tried to reconcile this crisis in the caliphate by defining a Hussein-centric piety as an essential element of the Muslim public sphere, the modern Ummah of Prophet Muhammad. The historicity of the Battle of Karbala was to be reasserted to make the transition from the first four caliphs to the Umayyad Caliphate unambiguous, to validate the legacy of the modern caliphate. The Battle of Karbala flourished as the most potent literary trope in the vernacular Muslim literary modernity across the subcontinent since the late 19th century, mostly pioneered by the vernacular-speaking ulama and Muslim literati. Such literary reimaginations, validated by the references of the Hadith repertoire and the Tariq literature, claimed historicity of the Battle of Karbala and theological authenticity of Islam as a rational system preached by the Prophet. Premchand's Karbala attempts to take its readers beyond an imagined community based on a traditional Hindu reading of an Aryan past and opens up possibilities of creating other kinds of alternative communities which are effective and beyond the fixity of geopolitical nation. We can ask several questions from here, like what is history then? And what is the efficacy of a genre like the historical play? And there could be various kinds of very interesting and I would say very important discussion on the efficacy of history as providing, I would say, literary justifications to create historical novels or historical plays. And I can refer to what Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, the doyen of, literary cultural nationalism in Bengal and also for India, actually said when he wrote the introduction to, Sir Jodu, actually he wrote his historical novels. And when his historical novels were published from Bangio Sahitya Porishad in one singular compilation, Sir Jodunath Sarkar, one of the most important historians of Bengal and the Indian subcontinent, actually wrote a critical introduction to that. And Sir Jodunath Sarkar said that actually the historical novels are more important to teach the common audience the values of history. So we understand how historical novels actually acted as a hegemonic tool for Hindu cultural nationalism. And we can read Premchand's idea of Karbala and his renditions and his dealings of play as a genre, as a sort of critique of such kind of interpretation of history, as it were, in the nationalist framework, in the Hindu nationalist imagination of the past of India. And I would say that Premchand's Karbala takes Karbala beyond Sunni reformist Ummah based on Hussein-centric piety and also a Shia Muharram-centric devotionalism. So these are the other two, imagined communities which cannot be encompassed in the confined nature of the geopolitical nation state, but Premchand was proposing another sort of transnationalism that might be informed by the value of Karbala, but that was reformulating Karbala in a different sort of idea of transnationalism to understand the nation and the narratives of nation. While we talk about the expansive reception of Premchand Hindi and Urdu Karbala in their respective literary spheres, we experience complex values of reception, again susceptible to the different formulation of cultural nationalism that marked these public spheres. Like Mir Musharraf Hussein's Bishad Sindhu in Bangla, literally it means the Sea of Sorrows, published between 1887 and 1891, which was the first prose narrative in Bangla on the Battle of Karbala, as it was held by his Hindu middle-class Bengali readers and fiercely attacked by the reformist Bengali Muslims. Premchand also faced dual responses. Finding publishers, as Professor Zaidi has already mentioned, for his Hindi Karbala text was not difficult, but his Urdu Karbala faced obstacles in circulation among his Urdu-speaking Muslim readers. The renditions of the Battle of Karbala and the crisis in the Caliphate, by coming out of the Islamic context as a literary theme for Mir Musharraf Hussain and as an ethical theme for Premchand, was highly appreciated by the Hindu reading public. Because for them, Karbala did not have any Islamic moorings anymore to hold them back from enjoying the Karbala narrative as a cultural story without the threats of Muslim identity politics. But for the Urdu and Bangla-speaking Muslim intelligentsia inclined to the Islamic reformist ideals, such renditions were not only inadequate, but a deterrent to the growth of Muslim social identity. This was a time when Muslims were facing the onslaught of hegemonic Hindu nationalistic ideals, civilizational otherization, and cultural hegemony as religious minorities. That's why Professor Zaidi's translation and critical introduction are such important contribution to critically revalue the ideals of cultural nationalism, communal questions, and literary modernity in colonial India through the lens of Premchand's Karbala. Premchand's Karbala celebrates the possibility of taking Karbala from the traditional semantic fields of meaning to become the metaphor of various conditions, be it the emergency for Ismat Shuktai, as she already mentioned, or exile from the homeland for Aga Shahid Ali. Professor Zaidi, through her critical English translation, succeeds in creating an alternative afterlife for Premchand's Karbala a century after it was written, and makes possible further scholarly interventions into the critical relationship between the Urdu and the Hindi literary spheres in today's volatile times. It takes the scholars to the contentious definitions of the nation. And I would like to bring back here Professor Zaidi's work on the oceanic networks as a critique of the unilinear idea of modernity and the temporally closed and chauvinistic idea of the nation. I must reiterate here that a translation of Premchand is not only an autonomous project of translation. This cannot be dissociated from her broader scholarly endeavors, where she offers multiple other possibilities of literary and ideational connection across spaces. She talks about other entanglements. So we need to look into such conceptualization to understand Premchand's Karbala in a broader multilingual field of literary and ideational entanglements, and try to understand other definitions of the local. Similarly, here, also our proposal is that the idea of the nation can be thoroughly revised through Premchand's lens of understanding history beyond the narrow religious identity politics and his interpretation of historical genres to inscribe the idea of the nation beyond any static imagined idea of the communities. As she rightly pointed out, the Benedict Andersonian idea of an imagined community as the basic, as a bedrock of nation, perhaps can be seen from a different angle if we use the lens of Premchand. So that's for now. So I'm having a very bad cold, so I was just fumbling and I'm sorry for that. So thank you very much again.
Thank you so much. It was really very moving and wonderfully concluded. So we will enter into question and answer session. Before that, there's a simple announcement for the coming Saturday talk. Rafat, can you?
Yep.
Yep. Yes, sir. All right. So coming Saturday is going to be a talk on feminism, basically revisiting traditions, mythology, society, and womanhood in India. Three of the very good speakers here. All are well-known writers, critics, and translators. All are feminists. And so stay tuned for coming Saturday on a wonderful discussion. Basically, all are going to discuss with one another, each other about the idea of feminism and womanhood in India and the world. So over to Dr. Rafat Hussain for moderating this question and answer session. Rafat.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Raziuddin. So before we begin the question and answer session, I would like to thank Professor Zaidi, Professor Rezavi, and Professor Heather. What a wonderful session. So the question and answer session is open now. You can raise your digital hand or show your interest in the chat box. So right now, come on, please raise your hand. Although there are a lot of compliments in the chat box, so I'm waiting for a question or a comment. Or anyone wants to come up
Jabbar Sahab.
first?
Jabbar Sahab started.
Jabbar Sahab raised hand. Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, it's a wonderful presentations as always. Educational, remarkable, history. So I think I read a couple of books, 3 books, in fact, on the Prophet Muhammad, the last, the 6 months ago. I think I try to understand the important essence of that figure is an important figure in history of mankind. So I think that my specific question, I think if I'm correct, I think the introduction, Professor Nadeem talked about Zainab. Was it true? He brought Zainab to in his introduction. Zainab was the daughter of, I think, adopted daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, I think, right? What is her role in this context? That's what I wanted to hear from him, because I thought he brought Zainab there.
Thank you, Jabbar Sahab. Okay, Rezavi Sahab, please.
The character of Zainab is a character which summarizes, in a way, the gender role which, Islam wants a woman to play. Generally, it is held that the woman in Islam has an inferior position, she's subservient, and the way women are, they are always to be hidden from sight. The character of Zainab, who is a sister of Hussein, the daughter of Ali, till the death of Imam Hussein, on the eve of 10th of Muharram, she appears to be a docile woman, always only following the orders of the leader of the pack, Imam Hussein, her brother. Her character comes into its own the moment the martyrdom takes place. And from that very night, the intervening night between 10th of Muharram and 11th of Muharram, from that very night down to the period when she is presented in the court of the Damascus as a prisoner of war. Here is the role which Zainab plays, giving speeches, trying to build up the morale of the prisoners of Karbala, telling them what to do, what not to do, always leading them. Although remember that Imam Zainul Abidin, the son of the Imam Hussein, who is supposed to be the 4th Imam, is alive, he is there. But the leadership is given in the hands of Zainab. She is the one who is leading it. So much so that today we can say that the message of Karbala, the message which Imam Hussein had to give, is brought to us through the medium of the speeches delivered by Janab Zainab. Here is a woman whom we find that at every town through which the caravan of the prisoners pass, she is the one in the lead. Whenever she sees people, she is the one who tells them who we are. And also tries to give the message what her brother stood for. the way the entire narrative has been built, it appears as if the entire Karbala message rests on the agency of Janab Zainab. And that is why I say that the importance of Zainab as a woman interlocutor in the so-called Islam of Hussein is very, very crucial and important. Similarly, she's not alone. Zainab is not alone in her gender role. There are other women also who, in fact, supplement her. For example, there is this young daughter of Hussein, whether her name is Ruqayya or Sakina or whatever. The entire narrative also builds up on her image. Incidentally, history tells us that Sakina, the daughter of Hussein, grew up to live for around 80 years, and she became one of the most prominent, culturally active, and knowledgeable woman of the region, a thoroughly well-read woman of her age, and a liberated woman for that matter. So that is why I am saying that in the story of Karbala, there is also this gender perspective which has somehow been ignored and which should be highlighted. I have just given a few examples.
Thank you, Professor Razvi.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you for that.
The next question is from Kaisar Naqvi Saab for Professor Zaidi. Would the tragedy of Karbala can be assessed as a renaissance for Islam as a religion, belief, and as a way of life for humanity? Professor Zaidi.
Well, you want to call it Renaissance or whatever you wish to call it, but the fact is that Karbala was that watershed moment in Islam that forever sort of made clear the principles on which one can call himself a Muslim. Right. So Karbala, as we say, haq ko batil ke beech qas se fasil hai. It's forever that line between truth and justice on the one hand and injustice on the other. So every time, every day, Karbala has to be lived every day. Karbala was not just one event. It became a touchstone. It has to be, every Muslim has to assess his character every day in the light of the event of Karbala, where he stands. So yes, it's a very important event in Islamic history for that matter.
Thank you much. So I don't see anyone.
Amir Saab, yeah, please. Amir Saab is there, and Ambrish.
Okay, now Amir Bhai raised the hand.
And
Amir Saab.
Comments.
I am impressed. Very scholarly talk. One point comes to my mind is that Karbala's story in the Indian subcontinent has taken a different format in some ways. For example, Mir Anis and Mirza Dabir's poetry has very much Indianized the whole legend of Karbala. The way it is presented, not as the 8th, 7th, 8th century Arabia, but more in Indian style, the way it was grieved and the way the tragedy unfolded. It is more in Indian style. Now, as I understand it, what I heard, Munshi Premchand also has introduced in his story some legend, which is not based, as far as I know, on any fact. One wonders is whether this combination of legend, cultural, to the real, actual story, would it, in some way, for the Puritans at least, will it help, or in the long range, or would it hurt?
Thank you, Amir Bhai. Who wants to take that question? Professor Zaidi, you are the main speaker.
Yeah, okay, right. Thank you so much, Amir Saab, for your very kind words. See, Karbala paradigm goes beyond its cultural context. What is important in that event and the way it has appealed to the people across the subcontinent is the value that it stands for. And that has been conveyed by every poet, every writer of different regions and languages, in their own ways. You mentioned Mir Anis and Dabir, but these are only two examples. India is a vast subcontinent. Indian subcontinent is a vast land. You go to Karnataka, for instance, right? There are different traditions. I mean, my friend Chand M. Basha is working on, Muharram narratives in Kannada, and beautiful poetry, right? Where the authorship is not fixed, but people have been singing. It has taken the folk form. Ipshita has been working on Bengal, Bengal commemorations of Karbala, or commemorations of Karbala in Bengal. So poets of different regions have, of course, added local color to add appeal among the masses. Okay, so there is a sort of funny joke that is shared, that in some village of Bihar, the Zakir was going on and on describing the tragedy of Karbala, and people were not crying. So he said, Imam Hussain ko khani bhi na mili, and everybody started crying, right? Because these things are added, but the essence of the story, that is the value that it stands for, the principles, the ideals that it stands for, that is conveyed to masses. The outward symbols could be any and could be multiple. Of course, the literary writers are, people who add, who sort of render it imaginatively, the story imaginatively. So they do add local colors, yes, but it never loses that essence. And the very fact that after so many years, the story of Karbala still makes appeal to masses, still people come back to it, it's a testament to, to the longevity and the truth appeal of the story.
Thank you, but where would you go to find the authentic story? Historians from now on, later centuries, for example, when they
No,
are
the main
digging,
story remains the same. Main story, no one tampers with the main story. The local colors are only cultural colors.
Thank you.
None of the writers or poets have tampered with the main story.
okay.
Thank you so much. Professor Rezavi.
Well, I would pick up from where Nishat Zaidi Sahiba just left. That Khani Binamili and the masses, they actually started, getting affected because they could understand the nuances of that language. And the Karbala story could be appreciated by them when it was narrated in their own language. And this takes me to ask a question, because both of you, in a way, are, professors of literature and English, in a way. I want to ask about the semantics of the language, the versification which was done by people like Mir Anis, Mirza Dabir, which incidentally these days, due to a statement given by a traditional mullah, are highly being debated. There are certain terminologies, certain versions, as you say, that in Premchand, certain changes were made, twists were given to the story. Similarly, in Anis and Dabir, who were writing during the 19th century, a process of Indianization starts taking place. You talked about, Premchand taking a piece of India to Karbala with a temple and a pond and, the Sanskrit language. But if you read Mir Anis and Mirza Dabir, it appears as if the entire Hindustani, North Indian culture has been taken and supplanted in the deserts of Karbala. with the traditional culture, the churi, the sindoor, the words like rand and bevagi and whatnot. So can you make a comment on why for 200 long years this process of Indianization which was taking place was never challenged by any group of Muslims, and it was taken to be the actual story being Indianized. What happened that today there are certain people who are getting up to challenge and object to this process of Indianization? Any answers for that?
Yes.
Nishat?
Okay. Well, I'm familiar with what is going on, but I think the controversy is not really so new. It is an old controversy, and Anisiye, Dabiriye, these camps have always existed among the Shia Muslims. Those who believed that those who supported, Mir Anis's style of writing, and those who were opposed to his style of writing, and so on and so forth. But both of them were poets, and poets or literary writers are not historians, so cultural adaptation is of course the first step, right, through which they can make meaning. It's a meaning making process. So in the meaning making process, they have to use language which is effective, right? If they are writing the story of Karbala in Urdu, and they have to make it poignant, and they have to create out meaning out of it, they have to make it moving and invoke all those emotions, right, render all those affective aspects to it, which are necessary to prerequisite of marsiya. They have to do it, and each poet does it in his own unique way. Mir Anis did his in his own unique way. Dabir did it in his own unique way. Both of them used, they were both Indianizing, but both used language that was so different. I always give this example. If Dabir would say, if Anis would say, कहते हैं माँ के पैर के नीचे बहिश्त है, Dabir would make it very, very, very ornate. Zere qadame walida firdaus se bari hai, right? So, if you want to understand the difference between Anis and Dabir and their language, this is the best example. Zere qadame walida firdaus se bari hai, कहते हैं माँ के पाँव के नीचे बहिश्त है. So, their language was different, their approach was different, but they were both Indianizing because they were both involved in the meaning making process. They were doing, cultural translation also of the event in their own ways, so that's a part of literary rendering. We should not really treat Marsiya poetry, after all it's poetry, we should not treat this as a theological text. Marsiya poetry is poetry after all. It's not a theological text where you can look for purity, and so on. That would be my response.
Thank you so much, Dr.
If you want me to respond, just Bengal chapter is actually
Go
very
ahead.
unique and completely different from the North Indian, or I would say Southern experiences. And we find the Karbala narratives in Bangla, especially in Brajabuli, from 17th century onwards. And there, without any orientation of the Muslim community that was emerging as a narrative community, without any sort of Sunni Shia orientation, the Karbala trope in the early modern, Bengal literary scenario became the most important affective cue to become Muslims. So this Shia Sunni division, was to be marked, especially in some, I would say, political centers like Murshidabad as a city-state, and also in Dhaka, when Dhaka became a station, governor station for the Mughals. So these two centers, urban centers, were Shia, but that did not affect neither the commemoration of Muharram nor the recitation and oration of the narratives of Karbala. And then such differentiations started to come up since the beginning of the 19th century, when the reformist Sunni, ulama, they actually celebrated the narrative of Karbala as the core of their emotional universe. They reasserted their claim on Imam Hussein. They created a Hussein-centric piety as an integral part of the Prophet-centric piety. So there was a kind of illustrious body of Karbala narratives basically coming out from the Boktola printing presses and also from the 1880s onwards. These poets started using Tatsama, Sanskritized Bangla. So that was a very interesting moment as, say, Dabir and Anis, they were Indianizing their literary tropes. These Bengali intelligentsia, Muslim intelligentsia and ulama, they were, I would say, Sanskritizing their, literary experiences and expressions. And that way, to create a language for the Bengali Muslims, they were trying to reconfigure it with the Persian and Arabic loanwords, and later on, they were adding the Urdu loanwords, creating a very interesting and productive multilingual experience and multilingual Sanskritized Bangla for the Bengali Muslims. But those literature, they were different from the, commemoration of Muharram and Marsiya and the Noha tradition that we find right now, because we can mark the emergence of the Shia community from, say, late 19th century onwards. Prior to that, there was no consolidation. They were loosely in the countryside and at the centers, and with the emergence of, say, Calcutta as a colonial city, we can see the placement of the Shia communities coming from different parts of India, from North India, from Iraq, Iran, and also from the Deccan. So that was a kind of organized and formal emergence of the Shia community and Shia establishment in Calcutta. So their, theological understanding, their use of the Marsiya, these were completely different from the previous literary renditions, though those were theologically oriented because those were the resultant of the Sunni reformist ventures. But these should be, read and looked at differently as two different kinds of literary venture.
No, I
Thank you,
mean,
sir,
if
for
I
the
may add,
question.
yeah,
Yeah,
sorry,
please.
if I may add, I just mentioned that Chand M. Basha, another friend of mine, is working on Kannada. So he's
Yeah.
working on Riwayat poetry, and he has sent me a short clipping where these people are singing Riwayat poetry. I can only catch words which are Sanskritized words, right? I don't understand Kannada, but I can clearly understand Sanskrit words, Rana, and so on and so forth. So obviously, we only know about Urdu, but if you move beyond Urdu, there's so much, about Karbala. I call it Sthal Purana. Like Sthal Purana, every land, every piece of land in India has its own approach and take on Karbala, but never compromising on the basic story, never compromising
Yeah,
on
definitely.
the message of Karbala. Yes.
And it's so micro-regionally varied. That's so important to notice. It's so multilingual, multicultural, and spatially so varied. So it's like, if we look at, say, West Bengal, so to speak, we have such a multilingual experience. So we have this in Urdu, especially centering on Kolkata, Hindi, and outside of the urban centers, you have generally Bangla and different sorts of Bangla. As you cross the regional, boundaries, you are getting different kinds of regional variation,
Yeah, in
and the
fact,
expressions are
yeah,
different
yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of their connection with, say, Kolkata, or their connection with Lucknow, or their connection with Hyderabad or Bombay. So this is so varied, but as you have rightly mentioned, keeping the basic, historical line and piety intact at the
Yes.
center.
In fact, within Uttar Pradesh, within North India, we only know about, famous Urdu poets, but there are so many, Bhojpuri Nauhas or Awadhi Nauhas in Awadhi, Bhojpuri, and Daha, which is still sung in some parts. So I mean, there are so many traditions, poetic traditions. We are only talking about poetic traditions, right?
Thank you. Dr. Nazir Ahmad,
May I just, if you permit me for just a second,
please.
there was this Hindi poet Braj Narayan Chakbas. Perhaps all of us have heard about him. He had written a poem on Ramayana, and there is two verses from that which I want to read out. रुखसत हुआ वो बाप से लेकर खुदा का नाम, राहे वफा की मंजिल अव्वल हुई तमाम, मंजूर था जो माँ की जियारत का इंतजाम, दामन से अश्क पोंछ के दिल से किया कलाम. You know, if I do not tell you that this is Chakpast writing for Ramayana, you would think that this is, verses taken out from the Marsya of Mir Anis or Mirza Dabir. So there was a tradition in which Premchand was writing. And, why I asked the question to Nishat is simply because of this, that in India, Karbala, as we started initially, when I just pointed out that Karbala is not only a religious incident, it is a cultural episode which brings us towards humanity. And that is why its reception in India, the entire story has been such. There has been incorporation from both the religious traditions. In fact, her work from Bengal also shows not only how Karbala influenced the Bengal society, but also how the Bengali culture had an influence on the development of the Muslim religion in the state of Bengal. So that is something which we should remember while we are dealing with such a topic as was chosen for today.
Let's move on to other questions, please.
Okay, Nazir Ahmad Saab, Dr. Nazir Ahmad.
In the vast panorama of human struggle on earth that we call history, there are certain hinges that define the march of human civilization. And Karbala was one such hinge which marked the end of the age of faith and the beginning of the age of sultans and kings. When you look at these hinges, what happens there is that old paradigms are challenged, old ideas are challenged, new paradigms emerge, new ideas are presented, structures change, dynasties change, and human civilization moves forward. When we look at Karbala from an incisive lens, you have on one side coercion, tyranny, injustice, and on the other side you have resistance, freedom, justice. If we were to take these universal ideas and somehow try to confine them within cultures, religions, nationalism, Hindu, Muslim, Shia, Sunni, Indian, Urdu, Hindi, those universal ideas lose their universal appeal. Now, the question that I have of the learned professors is this: what's the relevance of Karbala to the modern age? Karbala never stopped. It's happening today. It is not temporal or spatial. All we have to do is to wake up in the morning. There's a Karbala going on every day. What is the relevance of Karbala for the modern man?
Okay, it's a comment, Nazir Bhai, or it's a question?
That's the question.
What is the relevance of Karbala to modern man?
Professor Zaidi.
Thank you, Nazir Sahab. You yourself have answered your question, I believe, when you said that Karbala stands for universal truth and it has a universal appeal. So if it has universal appeal, it will be relevant in every age, in every period of history. Today, we look at Karbala from our location, from our moment in history, from our temporal positions. In every age, the the meaning regenerates itself, right? And that is what happens with those events which have universal appeal. Okay, so you asked what is the relevance of Karbala today, because Karbala is everywhere. The relevance is what it was then, that truth and justice never surrender before injustice. And even though they may be small, even though they may be momentarily uh, apparently defeated, but they never die, right? So they may be destroyed, but they can never be defeated, right? So Imam was killed, his companions were killed, but the idea was beyond his human body, and the idea survives. So you may destroy truth and justice, but you can never defeat truth and justice. So I think that is the universal universal appeal that Karbala has, and that therefore it gives hope. It's a message of hope that Karbala has for mankind, and it is hope that survives mankind, and so Karbala will survive as long as humanity needs that ray of hope.
Thank you, Professor Zaidi. And before I hand over to Razi Bhai again, so thank you all three speakers. It was a very interactive session. Thank you so much. Back to you, Razi Bhai.
Well, there was one question from Ambreen, I guess.
Was there? Or
I can read, or you can read.
which Ambreen? Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So this reading, okay, we still encounter such conservative ideas about Muslim women Islam, both from within and outside the community. This perspective is so valuable.
Well, there's a
I found it as a comment. I want to read more about this. Thank you everyone for this brilliant and progressive. So there was a comment from Ambreen, of course, so speakers are looking at them. Back to you.
So yeah, it's so well explained really and well said by all three, and I'm sure people have learned a lot and actually got a lot. For us, Karbala always is there, and we already have inhaled it, many lessons from it. Just one curiosity, in spite of all these, so much poetry about it, so much books about it, still we do not have this tradition of stage playing, right? The stage playing of Karbala, anywhere, I think, in the subcontinent. Why? I mean, when it is so effectively done in Iran, traditionally, Iraq and other places, it is always on the street they do. Just like we have seen in India about when Dasera comes, or maybe especially Dasera comes, or in Bengal tradition, during the puja and all those, there is always a stage drama on the nukkad, on the corner in the community. Why, even in the traditional areas where there is more concentration of communities, why there was never any urge to do this drama or the stage play? What's is
Thank
this
you.
that we don't want to depict the faces?
Yes.
But if you go with that tradition, this is true that if you see in an Arab room anywhere, especially a Shia Arab room, house, you will see pictures hanging. And we were never introduced to those pictures in the subcontinent. And I asked somebody, one of the Arab Shia. And I said, who are they? Because I was really not knowing it. And they said, don't you know them? And I said, no. Then when he explained, I said, no, we have only the writings in the frames, you know. We have things in the frame. We never put a picture in the frame. So what is this? When the traditions are taken from there, why we take the
Ravi
tradition
Saab,
of...
I'm sorry, I'm intervening in between. There is a very pretty long answer to
No, in this chart, especially, let me complete it, because why I'm saying, especially when we are always feeling so comfortable with the plural setting of the country or the continent, where imagery is not a unknown thing, where the Hindus do quite regularly normally. So why this was not put in some way, and whereas in the Arab traditions or the Middle Eastern tradition from where it came, there is always this kind of thing. So what is this?
Okay, let them answer. It's a simple answer, but let them try.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, I'll just give you one sentence answer that you cannot deny that it is not there in India. There are places where you will find the enactment of Karbala scenes during the Muharram. In fact, you have studied at Aligarh. There is a very small place near Aligarh, Jalali. Just go there during the Muharrams in the Karbala. There is a whole depiction of the scene which is there on the ground in Sakhni, in Sasni, and
So they do play. They do play.
There are plays which are there.
They don't play it, but this is
Confined,
the
very
simple
confined.
But because they are not state sponsored,
Yeah.
so you are somehow missing it.
But this is not really what I am, what I'm asking.
Yeah, but
Yes, and I answered that needs a 1 hour discussion, and
Yeah.
that can be done. There are very complex reasons for that.
And
If you would look at it in a little different way, and I think the mention was made about the Sahara. In India, in Pakistan, and maybe Iran, the whole week is devoted to the play. They call Tazia. I came from Badaयूं in Uttar Pradesh. In our hometown, whole week was devoted to what I would call the depiction of stories from Karbala. There will be ilm, and then there will be Tazias, and they will be buried.
I'm not asking about that. We all are familiar with the Tazia procession.
That is what it is. I mean, that.
No. I'm asking about the
Razi Bhai, it is rarely, faces are rarely shown in those.
both thing I'm asking. No, the reason
So that is the main thing, is to show the faces. And when you have to enact the Karbala scene, you have to include everyone who were the part of that tragedy.
I was asking.
So you are asking whether you can enact a Karbala stage play, which is going to be creating a right scene somewhere. So
Please let me reframe it. I'm just simply asking. I'm not questioning. I'm asking this thing. When the tradition is taken from Iraq and Iran, we all know that, right? Everything we have taken from them, at least in the Shia community, what they do. So every house there has pictures. We in the Indian subcontinent, where pictures are more common, murtis are more common, why the same Muslims there have tradition of hanging the picture? These Muslims don't. Whereas they could.
No, they do. I have seen the.
Rafat, you stop. Let them really. No. We are not defending here anything. We are asking. Curiosity there is a curious part of it. This should
You're right.
This should have been more a familiar ground in India for Shias especially to depict it.
No. Because the very assumption that Indian Shias have traditionally borrowed their culture from Iran itself is a misconception. The way that commemoration of Muharram takes place in India is very, very different from the commemorative practices of Iran. We can have a discussion.
Okay. I'm not.
Very different.
I'm just simply asking faces why we avoid. Is there a reason?
Yes, there are.
Is
There are
specific-
certain reasons which lie during the 16th, 17th century Mughal Empire. But I won't go beyond that to explain what those reasons were.
I have seen pictures of
Yeah.
Ali sitting on Burraq in India.
There's a calendar.
Hyderabad, perhaps in Hyderabad, every second Imam Bada has photographs of Imam Ali, Imam Hussain, Imam Zainullah.
But that's a calendar thing. There's a
No,
calendar.
it's not a calendar, it's a picture frame.
Picture people go and kiss.
Yeah. I'm asking the very.
In Hyderabad, there still is. In North India,
Okay,
which was
well,
at the temples,
okay.
it is not.
Okay. I just
In villages, people, let's see.
I just asked
People play
about when I asked about the stage that I meant was just like the Sarah, why not stage was has taken place. Even
Yeah.
at-
So
even-
Nahid Bano is saying, and that's I see in my town also. Though, so there are a lot of tashas and lathis play, and there are
that also I participated.
mostly done by Sunnis.
Yeah, I was part
Okay,
of.
one more sentence, if you allow me.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That sentence is that in India, the commemorative practices of Azadari starts Sufis and Sunnis.
Yeah.
It is later on taken up by the Shia community.
No,
Exactly.
we popularly say those two things. Don't feel offended.
Even Alam is something which was brought by the Sunnis, not by the Shia.
We say popularly in UP, in our all communities, all towns, that Sunnis perform the whatever you what
Incidentally, the oldest Imam Bada in North India, which is there in Delhi, just very near to the New Delhi railway station, was constructed by a Sunni Sultan,
yeah.
Tughlaq Sultan, and till date, the Muharram commemoration is being practiced there by the Sunni Muslims, not by the Shias.
But Nadir Sahib, there is a difference. That's what I was trying to say. Why always you will see the Sunnis performing all these martial things and all those, but not participating in the Marsiya, and the Shias doing the Marsiya, not participating in that. There is always, and we as children used to watch these things. That this is a distinct ceremony. But anyway, these are the cultural things,
Simple questions demanding long answers.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a very
Wonderful.
informative session, and again, 3 speakers, and that concludes the question and answer session.
So it is more than 2 hours.
Yeah, please.
You all must be very tired back home in India, very late. Probably, I am not sure whether you have taken your dinner before you started. So please feel to leave. And now we should end this session. It's more than.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.